Ready to get to it? ZOOMCAST. Log in and check it out.
Boy, oh boy, we are on live. Welcome everybody to episode 26 of this humble little ZOOMCAST. I, of course, am Matt Grima. Today's guest is someone that we've been looking forward to having on. He's got a story or two to share. I'm excited to have him. We're talking about someone with some serious credentials. REB top 50 agent, former Marshall White salesperson of the year winner. He's put away some properties at 19.8 million and has just recently sold one of Melbourne's more iconic properties in excess of 30 million. That was 39. Seacombe Grove. I speak of none other than Ben Vieth. Ben, welcome to ZOOMCAST.
Thanks, Matty. Look forward to this. I've listened to your series. I've been waiting for the call.
Well, it was going to come, but it's come at a very timely juncture. And I can see the Marshall White's banner in the background. You're sitting there proud in the Armidale boardroom. Mate, you're back. You're back in the four walls.
I am back. There was for you that don't know, I guess there was a very small stint of an exit of Marshall White, which was a very emotional time only some months ago. And I must say that it's been an overwhelmingly warming response of getting me back in. And I'm very humbled that people have been so open to get me back in and be so accommodating with entering back to Marshall White. It's welcome home, that's for sure.
Well done. For those who don't know, exactly right. You were absolutely flying out of the Bayside division, the Brighton office there under the Marshall White umbrella. You came with some nice credentials from Buxton a few years ago. You had a great run, and then you made a shift to the Buxton group, and then you've recently come back. Benny, I want to put this on the agenda. You go as hard or as not hard as you want in terms of answering any questions that you do or don't want to answer. It'd be remiss of me on this humble little ZOOMCAST that's available on Spotify and iTunes, by the way, Ben, to not say, with all due respect, what the bloody hell has gone on? What's happened?
Yeah, Matty, it's been a roller coaster of the last few months. I exited back in July, so it's been 4 months.
Yep.
The period of time, obviously, an end of a financial year. Most real estate agents, like somewhat of a football culture, there's sort of a selection process where you start to look elsewhere because you've done big numbers and all these sorts of things. And at that time, there was some people that left the Marshall White Bayside office that I was quite close with. They were friends of mine, mentors of mine, and they left to paint a picture at obviously Buxton that I thought was something that I could make work. It seemed like a really attractive offer, and it was. I moved on that quite quickly because I had not pressure from Marshall White, but I had an opportunity to buy into the business of Brighton with the team down there, and that was purely just based on some success. And look, that never eventuated, obviously, with a move to Buxton, Brighton, which is where I previously worked for 3 or 4 years. And look, a series of events occurred that it just didn't quite work out for no reason other than just personal things.
Yep.
And it's quite interesting. I think you really don't realize what you have until it's gone. I know as cliche as that sounds, but happy to talk about that further. But just the support and the network of people at Marshall White, it's very, very hard to find that elsewhere. And I can say that hand on my heart that the people and culture of Marshall White, whether you hear it externally where people do badger the brand and say that our culture is horrible and all these sorts of things, I can tell you now that we have probably one of the best cultures and working cultures in real estate that I've ever experienced. So for me, it was a very easy decision to come back. I'm extremely humbled by the opportunity to be able to walk back into a business that I walked out of. That was probably an emotional challenge for me to be able to step out. I always kept quite good relationships with everyone, and I always try and do that, even within competitive world of real estate. But yeah, very humbled to be back, and I feel like I've literally walked straight back into my home. So
good on you. Good on you. Hey, I don't want the Buxtonians to come for me, Benny. I'm a fan of that particular group, so I just want to put that on the agenda. Doing some nice things. That group, mate. When you made the decision to say, I don't think I've done the right thing necessarily, or I feel like I should be back in the fold at Marshall White. I would imagine still, despite feeling that way, that it would take a fair bit of courage to actually say, I am going to walk back in the doors, and I am going to communicate with some people under the Marshall White umbrella to actually make this happen? I can only imagine that, you know, your heart and your head were probably aligned, but might have been fighting each other at the same time.
But it's interesting because it came from both fronts. I left Buxton to join Marshall White, which back then 5 years ago was the number one competitor in the marketplace, being Marshall White. Buxton had been number one in Brighton for decades, and Marshall White had come into the Bayside Brighton market 10 years ago. Myself and another colleague kept looking over, going, geez, these guys are doing well and they're selling really good homes. Maybe we should consider that. So I left that Buxton brand and joined Marshall White, being that big competitor at the time.
Yeah.
And then I guess you fast forward 5 years to say then to Marshall White, to my family, that I'd created some amazing relationships with, both professionally and personally, to walk out of that business and go back to Buxton, where they lost me back then. They openly welcomed me back there, which was probably quite confronting at the time. It was very confronting to me.
Yep.
And I do have some feelings that aren't great about me leaving that business again, and just saying, hey, look, I haven't made the right decision personally for myself. I am a Marshall White agent. I live and breathe the values. You cut my wrist, I bleed blue. It was a brand that I couldn't leave. Like, the fabric of who I was, the jumper that I wanted to wear was blue. And unfortunately, look, I'm grateful it happened sooner rather than later. It only took me 3 months to work that out. It was on the back of a quite a significant sale in Brighton, which we landed at Buxton, and we sold that, being the current record in Brighton at the moment. But it was hard to leave on that merit, to say, hey, I've just sold a $32 million property and I'm out the door back to the competitor. So look, there's still a lot of dust that hasn't settled, but it was quite apparent that a lot of even Buxton agents did openly say, mate, you've really never left that brand. You've always been the Marshall White agent. And then I quite openly spoke about Marshall White very positively, which obviously, if you're a business owner of a competing business, if you start to hear that on repeat, it starts to niggle you, and probably not in a good way.
Yeah. A lot of people, Ben, when they consider moving positions, business teams, etc., can get concerned by what the market will think, what the clientele will think, what people that you might have sold to or sold for will think. Has it had an impact positively or negatively, and is it something that's on your mind?
Good question. Look, that was one of my biggest fears when I left the brand of Marshall White to Buxton. And look, I sold a $10 million property then, and I would have listed them at Marshall White at the time. I know this is quite political to talk about, but I left and went and joined Buxton. They said, Ben, we don't care where you go, whether it's your own or somewhere else, we're following you. And I think for everyone that's listening in, your brand is so important. And I think for me, I can openly say that Marshall White created the person and the brand that I have created in real estate. And without the brand and the fabric that Marshall White are, we really underestimate how much hours and the amount of time and effort that goes into creating a brand and retaining a brand and being positioned in a market like we're in, being one of the most competitive environments in the world of real estate. Marshall White are the most prestige agents outside of maybe one other in Australian real estate. And I underestimated that impact that it had on me personally, not necessarily for my brand, to going, how does it feel if I went and worked here or there? How does that feel? I don't believe it'll ever hinder you and all your performance, which is quite political in an environment where we're working in an extremely competitive market. But what I will say is that the brand that you carry as an agent and the person that you feel that you are is more important than what your clients think of you, because you're the brand that they're buying into with the alliance to someone like a Marshall White.
Yeah.
The inherentness of what you gain, and we are beneficiaries of the Marshall White brand. You carry that title. You wear the jumper, you get to walk into the office. Most people can all agree, if you ask anyone outside of real estate, everyone would agree that Marshall White is a prestige real estate brand.
Sure. And
they deal with the elite of Melbourne, whatever terminology that you want to use, which we don't need to go into, but it all leads to the same path. And I think for someone like me, I found leaving, that really affected me personally, where I felt like I'd lost my way. I felt like, hey, that brand I aligned with, and now I've lost that brand. And we all, I guess, in the world of brands, like there's a reason we all drive a specific car, or we go to a certain clothing maker, or instead of wearing a Rolex, you wear an Apple Watch. There is a reason why you wear that. You associate yourself with that brand. And I think with something like real estate, where it is so competitive and mentally taxing, to have a brand like Marshall White, or a competing business that is at this level, undervaluing the brand and what it does for you, it will actually destroy you. And I did it, and I've done it quite recently, which is why I'm back here.
Yep.
That's something that you can't ever buy. And I don't think you can ever create it with a business that's been around for this long and retained that position. It's I love cars, and I know you do too, Matty, and sport. If you look at Ferrari, Ferrari is an iconic Formula One team. They've always been number one. They've got that brand. Whether they've got it, you don't even know who the drivers are. I got no idea who drives a Ferrari in the Formula One team, but you know the brand. And that's something that's so important in real estate. People know Marshall White. Yes, they know you, but never lose sight of what the brand can do for you individually.
You've gone hard on the brand, Penny, but it sounds like the passion's there, mate. I'm not rolling with Rolex, by the way, or Ferrari for that matter. Just a humble kid from the western suburbs of Melbourne, Ben. But
my mate.
I want to tap into. I want to tap into. Some people will value what you've just said a lot more than others. Others just feel it's an individual game. You could literally put ABC Real Estate on the door, or the brochure, or the desk, and a result will be spun out. It doesn't seem like that's the case for you. You do value that link and that connection between what the brand offers you individually and your clientele.
I do, and if we look at just the operators, and I think that we talk about it from year to year, and
yep.
The last couple of years with COVID, we haven't been as connected as a real estate community as we used to be with ARIC and those sort of events. But I still remember when I started real estate just over 10 years ago, I used to sit in the front row of ARIC, and I'd see James Tostevan and Marcus Chiminello, and I'd see these guys, and I'm just like I get goosebumps talking about it. It's like, you guys are like superstars. I don't even know how to talk to you. And the reason I joined Marshall White is because I wanted to have that association with those people, not out of an arrogance, just out of, well, you've clearly done something right.
Yeah.
Now, we don't need to follow personal or whatever it might be, but we can all take pieces and positives out of those individuals. And there's more than one of them, and two of them at Marshall White. And I think that the association that you can carry with that brand, or the people in the brand, as I said before, you benefit from their performance and their work. It can't be underestimated.
Yeah. Well, and I'm curious, Ben. So you're born and bred in Geelong, right?
Geelong boy, born in the Ballarat Peninsula.
How do you find yourself from a young tacker in Geelong to selling some of Melbourne's most prestige pieces of real estate in some of the more prominent suburbs in Melbourne?
That's a good question. I don't actually know what's led me to my drive or my efforts. I think you can go back and look at stuff through family, which we won't go into, but I do pinch myself quite often. And like, you look at someone like Marcus, who does $30 million transactions with his eyes closed, and I've just sold one, and you sort of sit back and you go, wow, I've just broken the record in a suburb that's regarded as one of the most expensive suburbs in Australia. I really don't sit back and probably pat myself on the back, because as an industry, we're also told not to do that. And I try very hard not to do that on social media, although it's hard to, you do cross the line sometimes. You got to pat yourself on the back ever so often. But I guess it is humbling to sit back sometimes. And I think for younger agents, like, the ability to transform yourself, and I'm on a trajectory at the moment where it's very different to what I've known before. I'm wanting to, for the record, I'm wanting to go into a space that I guess I want to make myself uncomfortable. I want to shift that bar. I wrote $2 million last year. I've sold a few big homes, got some beautiful real estate that I own. I've got a beautiful partner. What's next? And I did sit back in the last few months, and it was partly why I left. I'm like, geez, I've sort of conquered this. What do I do now? And I left, and I sort of slowed down a little bit and realized that I'm 32. Like, what am I slowing down for? What are your dreams? And I I train with some of the young guys at Marshall White in the gym, and I ask them all the time, what are your goals? Like, tell me what your actual goals are, as big or as small as they are. And we talk about goals and dreams and aspirations all the time. And as cliche as it sounds, you can be anything that you want to be. And that doesn't necessarily need to relate to GCI. You don't need to be the number one agent at Marshall White. If you're a good person and you've got good values and you've got great people around you, why do you need to be the number one agent? I can tell you now, there's a lot of number one agents who are grossly unhappy. I was one of them. GCI is not the most important thing on the scoreboard. And a mentor of mine, Andrew Hayne, has been a mentor for many years. He would always sit down with me and we'd draw a bicycle wheel and we'd put the pillars and the spokes on that wheel, being family, spirituality, friends, partner, holidays, financial, all of these things that you can build a cycling spoke wheel. And you can do that any day of the week. And you go, okay, how am I feeling? How are my friends? Well, people ask me, Ben, how have you become so successful in real estate? Well, I haven't actually seen my friends for 10 years. My mate got married on Saturday. I didn't get invited to their wedding because I work. So the sacrifices that
fair
we
income?
make.
Is that fair income, Benny?
Yeah.
Do
I don't get
feel,
it. It is
you feel off about that?
I do. It's a very, it's quite an interesting thing to think about, really. Like I do sit back and I have reflected over the years. I'm like, geez, I've missed a lot of my mates' kids' birthdays,
right?
First birthdays. I've missed a lot of weddings. Admittedly, my relationship history hasn't been great because I literally have focused purely on real estate. Like it's kill or be killed. And if you're not on my zone and you're not on my path, get out of the way.
Right.
And I guess whatever you focus on, whatever you draw your attention to, your energy will go, whether that's family, relationships, or a combination of all. And I think the most important part for any real estate agent or any business owner, whoever is on this ZOOMCAST, I think what you're doing to identify different people and understand different brains. Like we've all got so many different things which you do. Like I would never have the ability to sit here and interview someone. But you're doing it for the industry because you love doing it. You're not getting paid for it.
No.
You do it for the benefit of others. And my point on that is, I'm not saying this for any other reason other than the analogy that you're not the number one agent in Toorak, but you're doing things for people that actually mean more to them than you being the number one agent in Toorak.
That's nice of you, Benny. If any sponsors want to jump on, if you could just give me a call, that'd be fantastic.
Come through me.
But well, they might actually. I think you'll have more contacts with more dough than I will. Can I say, Ben, you and I, we know each other. We obviously work in different offices, but we have some cross pollination, be it training or clientele that are up and down the bay from time to time. When you first swagged in to Marshall White, the version of Ben Vieth that most people got, I think, is a different version to the one that they might see on the screen now. Has there been a bit of an evolution in you about what you value and what's most important to you? It sounds, and I might be guessing, you might tell me to get stuff, but it does sound like there's been a journey or an evolution in what you're valuing at the moment.
It's I think life is a journey, and no matter what you learn or learn from, and I go back to a lot of the stuff when I was young, and your parents would say, "Don't do this." Well, I'd suggest you don't do that, or don't spend money on this. I've done it 10 times over just to prove that it's not the right thing to do.
Right.
And I think that the journey of life, I think there is so many facets to that. And I think I've spent a significant amount of time on development of myself. Quite admittedly, I'm from a background in my family where I went to a public school, which was very, very average. Most of the guys that I went to school with are either in jail or got tattoos over their faces in bikie gangs, and it's not great. It's not a great background, but it's that I still remember. I think it might have been Fred Gross that we saw some years ago. He said there was two brothers, and one of them, they had a very, very bad upbringing, and one of them said, well, what else was I supposed to do? And they became grossly successful. And the other said the same thing. What else was I going to be? And they were homeless on the street. So I think your mind is the most amazing asset that you have. And I have and I still do spend more time on myself than I do on anyone else, because without your own mindset being clear and always evolving, I think the most important thing for younger guys or women on this to learn from is never be fearful of actually failing. The amount of responses I've had in the last 3 days of saying, Ben, you were the number one agent in Brighton and you've just walked out to go start in a new market. Well, I don't really care what you think, because I know that in time I will prove to myself, not to them, that I will be successful. They just fuel my fire. And I think over the years, there's a guy by the name of Steve Griffiths that I've been doing a lot of work with, and he was the mentor for Nathan Buckley and all these guys. We're very fortunate to have him at martial art.
Yeah.
There's his training of your mind is the most important thing that you can do, whether it's spirituality or whatever you believe in. Doesn't need to be God. That will drive you to bigger places, I guess, the journey that it will take, because life will just keep going around in circles. For me, what was important to me only some years ago was it was important for me to be driving around in a Ferrari with my name on the number plate and showing off to everyone. That was really important to me at that time.
Right.
I don't know why, but I learned pretty quickly that, hang on, this doesn't feel right. This is actually not who I am. I went through that, opened the door, walked through. Yeah, it's great to be driving a $500,000 Ferrari around at 30 years old, but probably not the right thing to be doing.
Right.
But I did it, and I learned from it very quickly. So I think the most important part is continue growing. Have a team. We all love sport. I certainly love sport. Maddie, I know you're massively into sport, and they have teams. A Formula One car driver has a team. He doesn't change the wheels or know where the bolts come from. It's got nothing to do with it, but he knows the team that's doing it. For us as agents or performers or whatever word you want to use, we need a team. Who is your team? And I'd encourage you to think about who your team is. Who do you look up to? Outside of real estate, inside of real estate.
Yeah.
Who do you look up to financially? Who do you look up to for what home they live in? I still remember James Tosterman some years ago. I said, mate, show me your properties. He goes, oh, I own this one down here. I'm like, that's your house? You've got to be joking me. That inspired me.
Yep.
Andrew Hayne, the same thing. What are you doing? Oh, I'm just building these 2 townhouses here. Wow. Okay. Marcus, what are you doing? Those are team members that I don't pay them. They don't pay me, but they are part of my team that they don't know. Whether it's a spiritual, you've got a relationship, you've got a fitness trainer that trains you to be in peak performance, a mindset coach. Who is your team? Yep. Accountant, lawyer, whatever.
Yep.
That is something that I'd encourage everyone to do, because it's probably the most important thing that's got me from where I was only some years ago to where I am now, is having people around me and asking questions. Never, ever fear to fail. Yeah. You will fail if you don't ask questions and you don't ask consistently, whether it's even in real estate. I see the amount of young guys that they continue to fail at real estate because they just refuse to get help. Come and talk to us. Like, we'll help you. We've done it 10 times. What you're about to do, we've done 100 times over.
Sure. Yep. Do you and there are a lot of people in your martial art tenure that come and see you for a bit of mentorship and guidance. When you do get somebody inexperienced in front of you, what are the first couple of things you unpack to try and make them a better version of themselves or a better agent?
It's interesting because I put myself back to that person when I was that person only some years ago. And you've got to be very respectful that my point of view is not necessarily how they're going to see things. So you need to really, I think, coming down to someone's level or coming up to someone's level, not down, that's not the right word, but just becoming on par and understanding what they value. Okay, Matt, so tell me what you value. Is it, what's your goals? Like, my goals right now is to buy a bigger home than I'm in now. That's my goal. I don't
Yep.
know why, but that's
Yep.
just the goal that I have. For a younger guy, it might be, okay, tell me what is something that you want to achieve in the next 12 months.
Yep.
Well, really love to get out of this car and buy an AMG. Okay, great. So why is that important to you? Well, it would make me feel like I've achieved something. We set these really high goals that sometimes don't work. And I used all these small stepping stones to get to where I am now, that they become bigger goals. They become, I've got to buy my partner a wedding ring goal. Where am I going to do that? Where are we going to go on holidays next year? When am I going to have a child? These are my goals now.
Have you
5
done
years
that?
ago,
Have you done that, Benny? Are you engaged?
no,
Okay.
no.
That's
The ring
that's
that
probably
my
on the
partner
plan.
wants, I'm going to probably need to write 10 million GCI this year.
God,
No, I'm only joking. Hopefully she doesn't listen to this. But I guess the getting to that level and understanding what they value.
Yep.
And that's the journey that they're on. It doesn't need to be buying a multi-million-dollar house.
So before you get down to tin tacks about real estate and the nuances that take people to the next level, you're unpacking where they're at currently and what they're striving to become or where they want to be.
Absolutely. And more often than not, they actually don't have goals.
Right.
We are taught in business profession and somewhat more so real estate. We're taught not to actually have these big dreams and aspirations.
Yeah.
Because we know the tall poppies of Brighton. Sorry, not Brighton. We know the tall poppies of real estate. We know who they are. Most people never want to be that person, but we know when we hear the chatter, we go, Jesus, have you heard what this guy's done? Oh my God, look what he's posted. These things we're told not to do. So if we're exposing ourselves, we're going to be criticized or judged. So I think, especially in the modern world of social media, we are trained not to have these aspirational goals, because if we fail, you're going to fail publicly.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the biggest failure. You don't need to be publicly saying these things on social media. Do it for yourself. I still daily write out a mantra every single morning. I write it on a Post-it note. I've done that for 10 years. And it can be something so simple to just bring you back down to I guess a level that helps you grow. And as I said, most of them don't have goals because it's something that challenges us.
Yeah.
I got asked what my goals were 3 months ago. I didn't have an answer for it.
Would you now?
I'm sitting here. This was one of my goals. Get back to martial white.
Interesting. So people, what makes different people tick will change, obviously, dependent upon their personality type. Talk to me about your daily setup. So I'm intrigued in that. So you write out a mantra. You're up early. You're an exercise phenom. I think the shirt's a good size, but there's some muscularity in there. Fitness, health, all that sort of stuff attributes to what you do on the field day to day in real estate, doesn't it?
I think that real estate. I remember sitting back at ARIC many years ago, and this was before I joined Martial White, and I was watching Kate Strickland do an ARIC talk, and something that's still stuck in my mind today. And she said, whatever time you give real estate, it'll take twice as much. No matter how much it'll just take it. It'll absorb every minute that you give it, and it'll continue. Our phones don't stop.
No.
And for the industry that we work in, there isn't an off switch, but you have to find an off switch for yourself. When I started real estate, all I wanted to know was how to become $1 million agent. Back then, that was a lot of money. Now Marcus does that in bloody two weeks. There is no book to write $1 million. If you want to be a surgeon, you go to surgery, you go learn 10 years, you're a surgeon. We can make more than a surgeon in 1 year by having no education. Like, put some humility around that. So I think for the context of that learning space, there's, I guess, the time that it takes to become that agent or whatever that might be, you've got to do it in a very, very, I guess, controlled manner. And I said that earlier. I have given all of my time to business and real estate, and it does come with sacrifice. Yeah.
Is there an improvement opportunity for you in that world, Benny? I'll sort of go back to the point that you made about missing weddings and birthdays and kids things that happened with your friendship group and your family. Is that somewhere where you'd like to try and get a bit better, or do you understand what it takes to be at the level you're at?
I think that that's a good question. It's slightly conflicted now because I have grounded myself into a Melbourne environment where most of my friends are in the Surf Coast or in Geelong. All my family still live in Geelong, and I try and find as much time to see them as I can. But I think, as corny as this sounds, my friends and family, without taking away from my actual friends of school, they are people that I work with. I could ring anyone at Marshall White that I'm close with, and they would drop anything to come and help me, and I would do the same for them. And that to me, I know I said this earlier, I didn't value that when I left. I didn't value my friendships, relationships, people that are there that you can just ring and say, "Hey, how are you?" Kane Lanyon called me this morning. He said, "Buddy, it's so good to have you back. How are you?" Ollie Bruce, I saw around the town the other day, just said, "Mate, how are you?" I'm like, far out. Like, you guys are like my mates. And I treated you, and I turned my back to you, and I went and joined another business that I wasn't friendly with. So to answer your question, I think it would be good in time to rebuild those relationships. For me, the most important thing for me and my family, which is something I didn't necessarily have, is to make them feel like money isn't necessarily a problem or an evil or whatever it might be, to say we can't have these things. I want my kids to have a good education if that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
And that organically will come with, then you'll find a different group of friends. Yeah. That's the evolution of life.
We need friends, Benny. We need family, and we need balance. And it sounds like you've created a world where it's sort of all encompassing, which is nice. But I'm not telling you how to suck eggs, but make sure you put family and friends inside and outside of the industry at the top of the agenda, because it'll move pretty quickly for us. And I think a lot of people know that and see that happen. What's next for you? So you're talking about working across a couple of markets. You're just trying to play at the top end of whatever Melbourne's going to give you, and thus be more of a client-focused estate agent as opposed to a suburb or a municipality specialist, Ben.
Very, very much so. The focus, and this comes back to setting goals. I had a question put on me last week, or not last week, a couple of weeks ago. It was as simple as, Ben, what do you want to be? Geez, okay. How do I answer that? Just sold the most expensive house, all this sort of stuff. What do I want to be? Well, I don't know how to answer that, but I'd love to be one of the best agents in Victoria, not GCI, just regarded as. Mm-hmm. You look at, so let's use Marcus as a key example of that, because he's approved performer at that level. I'd love to be that in 5 or 10 years' time. I don't know how long it's going to take, but for me, I took a role at a previous business, which I've been talking about, to slow down. I'd performed at Marshall White I was the number one outside of directors for 3 years in a row as the number one agent. I was sitting back going, oh my God, how am I going to do this again? This is actually frightening. So I took that opportunity over here because it was a bit more, okay, sit down a little bit. We'll give you high shares. Your income will come in. You don't have to do as much GCI.
Right.
I sat there very quickly, and I'm like, that doesn't fill my tank. I want to perform. I love performing. We all perform in some regard. You either perform on the football field, you can perform in opera, you can perform in real estate.
Yep.
We perform at something. Yep. For me, it is real estate. And the reason I've chosen to maybe take the blinkers off from Brighton a little bit was I live in Toorak at the moment, and I don't know why. I do believe in the universe and spirituality and all that sort of stuff. It's quite funny. I was renovating my house only a few months ago, and I was underneath the house or ripping the stumps out, and I was still at Marshall White, and I pulled out this forthcoming auction board from underneath the house.
Yeah.
And it was an auction board from the 1980s of the house that I'd bought. It was auctioned by Marshall White. And I was like, wow, how's that for the universe speaking up? So look, that really never left me. I'm like, geez, I'm in Toorak, I'm walking Clendon Road, I'm walking around these billionaire properties. Imagine if I could sell these one day. I'm not saying I'm going to compete with Marcus anytime soon, but geez, one day I'd like to think I could. And for me, it was quite an easy decision. One, I wanted to be back at the brand. The brand, to me, as I've said and laboured throughout this ZOOMCAST many times, it means a lot to me. I wanted to be in Armidale. I wanted to be in the Mecca of Melbourne. being, I guess, Toorak and Armidale.
Yep.
I wanted to try something new. My house is around the corner. There's just so many little things that tied into that. And it was a challenge. Not that I was the number one agent in Brighton and all this sort of stuff, and I've done that and conquered this. It wasn't about that. It was, I really thrive off a new challenge. And I think I always like to feel like I'm going towards something. And you hear quite often about football teams where they become number one and they fall off the cliff really quickly. Look at Western Bulldogs, just as an example. Hopefully there's no Bulldog supporters, but they jumped on this. They were just flew. They just bang, bang, bang. They won. And then they fell off because they didn't know what to do with it. They weren't chasing anymore. They were there. And I think for me, I really enjoy the chase. I really enjoy the fact that I have to go back and grind. That gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yep.
I'll still be running a team in Brighton because I've done that there for 7 years, and there'll be still a significant amount of business there. But for me, I wanted to just focus on luxury real estate, which I identify myself with, and I can talk about it quite openly. And I think in real estate, there are so many real estate agents. Most people that, like, there's 4 or 5 agents that we know, and I know this guy and I know that guy, but there are some key players in real estate. I know James Tosterman. I know Marcus Chiminello. We won't go into other brands of who they are, but there are key players in Melbourne real estate. For me, I don't know what it is, but it's something inside of me that's saying I'd love to be that in a few years' time. It might take me 10. I don't know. I've said at 40 years old, I want to be Marcus. Maybe I'll look back at this in a few years' time and
just stay away from the Port Phillip market, will you? Bruce and Lanny and Hollard and Who and Sarah Wood, they'll come after you pretty quickly. But you're a different thinker, and I've enjoyed this. There are some ways that you think an interview might go, and this has gone in a totally different direction, and I'm really comfortable with it. So you're a Toorak man. You're out of Stonington. You're going to do some stuff Bayside way. You've been incredibly successful under 2 umbrellas. We're wrapped to have you back in the Marshall White family. And, mate, I wish you continued success. Nice to see you up and about. No doubt you'll have a few phone calls to make. You'll probably have a database to steal back at some stage. I think the Brighton boys and girls have gone ballistic on that. So
they certainly have.
You'd want to get back onto that pretty quickly. You probably will, mate. You'll have a target on your back. There's no doubt. I don't think you're someone who shies away from the competitive edge of sales and real estate in general. So I think you're going to do incredibly well. It's nice to see you up and about, and nice to see you back in the 4 walls.
Thanks, Matty. It's been good to watch your journey through this, and mate, I am very, very happy and humbled to be back at Marshall White. So, thank you.
Good man. Thanks for coming on ZOOMCAST.
Thanks, Matty.
Cheers, mate.